So I'm standing on this hill that's overlooking the valley below me. Now this place has a boat-shaped formation that's exactly 300 Egyptian cubits long, which is the length given in the book of Genesis for Noah's Ark. And we're also in the mountains of Ararat, which is the location where Genesis chapter 8 says Noah's Ark landed. So we have a ship shape that's exactly the length given in the Bible, and we're in the right location. And so we really believe that this is the buried remains of Noah's Ark, and we hope that this research can prove it. We're using a new type of radar that can penetrate deep into the surface. We're wanting to core drill and stick underground drones into any cavities we find. We're going to be pulling out samples, looking for ancient DNA, looking for different markers in the soil that will indicate that this was once Noah's Ark. Hi, my name is Andrew Jones, and I'm here in eastern Turkey in the mountains of Ararat, and we're doing this research project where we're researching what many believe to be the buried, decayed remains of Noah's Ark. So I didn't plan to be out here living my life in the mountains of Ararat. We're just a mile from the Iranian border right behind me. It was kind of a step-by-step process. I was really interested as a kid in archaeology, but then I went into computer science in college. My parents said, you're not going to make any money in archaeology. Make that your serious side hobby, and you can have a day job that will pay for the trips. And so that's what I did. But then I started going on excavations in Israel, and I was doing a lot of trips traveling through the Middle East, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and then Turkey. And I got really interested in this site that was discovered in 1959, but I first heard about it through an American explorer, and he was doing work out here, and he came to Sacramento, California, where I was living in middle school, and he gave a presentation. And I heard from my father, who went to that presentation, about this man who said Noah's Ark was discovered. And so I knew I had to research this myself. And I ended up calling the man on the phone. And then in 1997, in the middle of my college years, I flew out here with a friend, and it was my first time seeing this boat site. The Turkish government had already built a visitor center, so there was some recognition to the potential here, but I wanted to do more research on my own and not just come as a tourist. So I just started coming here, especially after 2013, year after year, and got to know the locals. And then in 2020, the pandemic hit, and a friend who I knew here for a while, he said, why don't you just stay here? It'll be cheaper for you to live. We don't know when the borders will reopen, and you can get to know the Turkish officials. You can get to know the locals and the laws here, and we can really push for this project to get the research to the next level. And that's what we did. In 2019, 6 months before the pandemic, we had scanned the boat with the GPR for the Science Channel. And then 2020, I moved here. I started living here, and that's how it happened, because of the pandemic and a friend inviting me. Otherwise, I probably would still be in California. But I'm really grateful that the door's open, because it's really helped this project along.
So you first came here in 1997, came back in 2000, and then 2013 and on, you were here constantly. What kept pulling you back?
You know, it's the mystery of what's below the surface. You see the earthen formation. You know it's exactly 300 cubits long. You hear about the data from the 1980s when the first explorers out here were using metal detectors, and they're getting a regular pattern of metal. They're using the first radar out here, and they're seeing a pattern of reflections below the surface, but no one has excavated the site. No one has put in a systematic core drilling system to pull out samples to see what's really below the surface. And so it's that the mystery of it all, wanting to show that the Bible is true to people and see what's below the ground. So that's why I kept coming back. I am still living here. I spend 6 months out of the year in Turkey most of the time, and we're not finished with the work. I don't think we will be for a number of years, and so just that mystery is pulling me back into this area.
Has this expedition cost you personally?
Yeah, you get a lot of attacks. Before, I was a software developer, so you sit behind the desk and you develop your code, you debug it for many hours at night. I was doing iPhone apps later on my own, And that's like a solo job. You're a loner on a computer. You don't have to worry about customer support that much, except for your client. You don't have to worry about criticism, being attacked on the internet. But once we started this work and the word got out, I mean, especially this year, I've seen the Facebook comments and YouTube comments of people just really going after us and saying, we're looking for like the North Pole or Santa Claus or something. But I understand that, because people who are unbelievers, they think the whole story is a fairy tale. And we're just focused on our job. So I'm less and less online because we're so busy right now. But I have friends who help leave comments and reply to people who are criticizing us. But that's not going to stop us. We're going to do our best to finish the work here. But yeah, it's definitely I get friends telling me, hey, did you know this person just called you on the internet, some bad word or name, and like, okay, in the past that might have affected me, but not right now. We're just so focused and busy that it's not affecting me.
In 2019, you ran radar across this site for a Science Channel special. What came back on the screen?
Yeah, so it was an amazing time in 2019. So 6 months before we did the radar, we got in contact, actually Science Channel contacted us. They're part of Discovery Channel, and they said they wanted to send out a London production company to film Noah's Ark. They wanted to do a 1-hour special about Noah's Ark. And I said, well, I don't know what's going to happen this fall. They wanted action shots, not just doing a sit-down interview. And so I said, well, but they had their budgets and time frames. So they said, we have to set some dates. So I said, okay, come the last week that I'm here, and let's just hope that something's going to happen that week. About 3 weeks before that last week, the end of September, we were able to secure permits to do geophysical survey work, which is, it's kind of like a CAT scan. There's different technologies and techniques they use, but we used radar, and we also used LiDAR to map out the site, and we had a thermal camera to see the heat signature of the sides of this boat. But the big thing was using radar, which uses this electromagnetic signal that's being shot into the ground thousands of times a second, and then based on the different properties of the object below the ground, whether it's a rock, a void, or soil, or petrified wood, or whatever, those signals will come back at different times to the receiver on top, and then the computer software will map it out. And so when we were here doing this film production with the Science Channel, as we were radaring the site, I remember one of those days there, that they came back up from the, we were up here at the visitor center. They were down there doing their work. We had to stay back and not interfere with them. And then they came running back up here saying, we found something interesting. And one of the guys on the crew took out his iPhone when they were doing the radar work, and they're scrolling through the data, and about 9 feet down, about 3 meters, they start seeing parallel lines going across the screen and perpendicular lines, forming right angles. And that was very exciting. The radar technician said, look, this is something we're needing. We're not just random noise, boulders and dirt. No, we're actually seeing structure below the ground. And whether it's natural or man-made, we were, of course, excited to see that type of organized structure right below the surface, and that made the Science Channel people very excited too, because they have something to show on their show that they're producing. And the guy who was part of he was actually the producer, and he said, look, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in any of this stuff, but he said, he told me the next day, he said, I went and told my grandmother, who's a believer, that, hey, I could be on the actual remains of Noah's Ark, and they actually found possible evidence below the surface at this boat-shaped site. And so that was very exciting, hearing that story. And of course, for us, we don't know what to expect. It's not like we're forcing the results. We brought in this random team, actually, from America. They're professionals. They were hired to do their job. And as they're going, scanning the site, they come across this data. They're collecting the data, and they see on the screen, on their radar unit, that right below the surface right there is this organized pattern. So that was very exciting.
So walk us through how you got permission. Who had to say yes, and how long did it take?
Yeah, so our current project, we got a permit through Sivas University. It's one of the universities here in Turkey. And what happened about a year ago, I was in Cairo, Egypt, giving a tour. And when I was at our hotel just right across from the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid, and an American friend who also does tours there invited me to have meet him on top of the balcony of the hotel, the top floor that has a restaurant. And I get there, and he introduces me to a Turkish archaeological student. And this lady was telling me that she goes to school in Turkey, and she's a big Instagram influencer for archaeology in Turkey. In fact, this year she won an award. But we just stayed in contact over Instagram. We were following each other. Earlier this year, I wanted to really push through finding the right team to help us get the official permits, so we can do more than just take video. Actually, go and core drill the site and use radar and all sorts of technology. And I contacted her. I said, hey, we have a possibility that we need help on this. Do you know somebody who can help us get the permit? And she said, oh, I know this professor. He's looking for a project. And it was a professor of archaeology, Dr. Cenker Attila. Dr. Attila has been an archaeology professor here in Turkey for about 30 years. And he had just finished another project. And he was starting a new one that then got denied because of the location. It was on private land and they didn't get permits for that. And so when he heard about our project, he said, look, I can help you. What do you want done? And so I wrote up everything we could possibly think of that we wanted to do on the site, including core drilling down to 75 meters. And he submitted everything to the Turkish government, to this commission that has to vote on it, and they meet once a month. And they ended up approving, unanimous decision, no questions asked really, a whole project. And so that's, God opened the doors. We ran through it, but we had put everything we wanted to do in the project, and it was approved.
So what is going on with the Turkish government right now, and why now?
That's a good question. This site has been not abandoned, but just been sitting here all these years. It takes, I think, the right professor who's interested, who'd want to put their name to, they're going to get persecuted too. In fact, he was kind of laughed at. Some of the Turkish news outlets put out news about the project starting. And he told me he got 50 or 60 negative comments from Turkish people about him doing this. They're saying he's wasting his time and money, researching Noah's Ark, because they obviously think Noah's Ark does not exist. You have to find somebody who's going to put their reputation and name on the line, a professor. This is in the country of Turkey, so you can't, as an American, you can't come out here and do an excavation. You have to be an archaeologist. You have to work with a Turkish partner and a university. And so that has to be all set up. And it just worked out that he got the support from his local university to do this project. And he was very supportive of what we're doing here. And so all the the doors opened for him to do it, and he was willing to help us. So here we are, actually in the middle of the first research season.
Why does it have to be this year? Is the site itself at risk?
I think everything, as a believer myself, I think everything is done according to God's timing. When you look at it throughout history, when he wants something done, it happens. And for me, Noah's Ark is a special story. We find in the New Testament, even Christ talking about as in the days of Noah. And as a believer, we do see the signs around us that we're living in these last days. The world is crazy. But at the same time, you then see the Noah's Ark story almost constantly in the news. Maybe not just what we're doing out here being in the news, but this is the story in general, whether it's Hollywood making a movie about it or people talking about Noah's Ark. And that's what I've noticed over the last couple of years. This momentum is building with the interest. So to me, it has to be what the Bible says, that we're in the last days and people need to pay attention to the story of Noah and the flood and what that means for us today. And the proof is, look at all the news stories, especially last year and this year. We've been on so many different secular news channels, but also on like CBN and other religious news organizations interested in what we're doing. So it definitely is a timing issue, and we're walking through the doors that God has opened.
So what does the local tradition say? Can an ordinary person come and stand there?
A local tradition. So, if you look at who lives here right now, we're in the country of Turkey, and this area is a lot of Kurdish villages. Now, they themselves, they have names like toponyms, place names of sites around here that fit the biblical account, but they don't fully understand why the names are there. For example, nearby, there's a valley called the village or valley or region of 8. Now, in the biblical account, there are 8 people on the ark. Now, if you look at this site, the ridge above me, by the Iranian border, that ridge is called where the crow or blackbird won't land, or the raven, where they're all the same species basically. And these, the villagers, they're like, well, we don't know why it says the blackbird or raven or, crow won't land up there. In the biblical account, Noah releases a raven from the ark, and it doesn't find any land, but it comes, I think that's the one that came back with the olive branch or olive leaf, but I know it did come back to the ark. And so you have these place names that match different aspects of the biblical story still being used in this area. Now, in regards to the mountains of Ararat, a lot of the villagers are Muslim, and so in the Quran it talks about Noah's Ark landing on Judy. And when you talk to some of the local villagers in this immediate area, they say, oh yeah, we sometimes call this Judy right here. And so it even fits their religious traditions and books. So it's very exciting because you're not just looking at physical evidence of a boat shape, you're hearing ancient stories and names that can be associated with the biblical account in the story in Genesis.
Genesis 8:4 says the mountains of Ararat, plural. Most people picture one snow-capped peak. What is the difference, and where does the site sit?
So we're about 19 miles south of the famous volcano, Mount Ararat. And a lot of people in the past have focused on that mountain because it's the tallest mountain in Turkey. But the biblical account, as you correctly noted, says mountains, plural, of Ararat. And the name Ararat actually comes from this word Urartu, which was the name of an ancient kingdom that was over this whole area. They were a mountainous kingdom, and they covered into, their territory covered into Armenia, Iran, and of course a large part of eastern Turkey where we're at. So we're in the right location. The mountains of Ararat, the mountains of Urartu covers this area where we're doing this research.
What are the Drogue stones, and why do you connect them to this site?
So about, I think it's about 20 or 25 miles northwest of here in a village that's called the Village of Eight. This area has up to 26 huge stones with holes. Now some of these stones have crosses carved on them by Christians later on, from the Armenian Christians, but other of these stones are just blank slates, just huge megalithic stones with these holes near the top. Now, it was a man named Ron Wyatt, an American explorer in the 1970s, who came out here looking for Noah's Ark, that first identified these stones and suggested that they were anchor stones or drogue stones. Now, drogue stones are stabilizing stones that you tie to vessels. So in ancient times, when you're going out on the open sea to help stabilize your ship and so it doesn't capsize, they would tie this extra weight to the outside. And so Ron Wyatt was the first person to suggest that these were associated with Noah's Ark because they were so much bigger than the stabilizing stones you find around the Mediterranean in the ancient shipwrecks on the coast of Israel or Turkey. And so the suggestion was that Noah's Ark was this huge wooden vessel, so it needed these stabilizing stones tied to the sides of the boat to help it in the storm. And right near this site, we're finding these huge stones with holes that are just a larger proportion to the stones you find at smaller shipwrecks around the Mediterranean.
So what is the entire process that you have planned? You're wanting to do core drilling. What is that? And then what's next?
Okay, so this year, the entire process of what we have on our permit, we started off with survey work. We wanted to create a base map where everything else can be placed exactly, sub-centimeter accuracy to show where everything is on the earth. So to do that, we hired a survey company in Turkey. They came out here, they established these, they call them ground control points, GCPs. These are, we have 8 of them, 2 of them in solid rock and 8 in the soil. And they took exact GPS measurements at each location. So you're looking at not just, you do go on your iPhone and try to find out where you're at. The dot will kind of move around on Google Maps and it'll say, oh, it's within maybe 10 feet or 10 meters sometimes, like 30 feet, the accuracy. Well, no, this is sub-centimeter accuracy when they do these professional survey work. And so they established these points, and then they took a drone, a high-quality professional drone, and they flew over and collected 4,000 photos. And it created an ortho map that gives the archaeologist this beautiful high-resolution map of the whole ark site in the valley. And then they also could take that and they made it a 3D model, a Gaussian splat, a 3D mesh model that then we can 3D print the site. We can see on computer screens what we're looking at, and we're going to use that for future research, and also make a 3D scale model for our visitor center here. So that was step one. That's already finished. Now we're in the process of looking below the ground with a new type of radar. It's not new as in a new technology, but it's new as it's never been used in Turkey. This type of radar can penetrate the soil super deep. At our site, we're looking down to almost 100 meters depth. Yesterday, we collected data up to 95 meters down and high resolution, so it can give us possible anomalies like maybe there are rooms down there, cavities that haven't been filled, or just the shape of the hull of the boat if it's preserved. So it's a way to look below the surface like a CAT scan and not have to disturb the soil and destroy the site, which is very fragile. So we're scanning underground, and that's what we're in the process right now. Next step, we're going to start collecting soil samples this month, do a major about 200 soil samples inside and outside, so we can compare a couple meters below the surface what the soil is like to see if there's anything that would give us a chemical analysis that would show a difference between the ship shape and the random mountainside. So, look at the chemical imprint possibly of Noah's Ark as the wood decayed away, whatever it left in the soil. So we're doing that, and then next month we will finish the season with core drilling. And this has never been done on this site successfully, and we're going to take a coring machine that will give us a way to collect data deep into the site, and then we can pull out that core of all the soils and layers in there, hopefully something man-made, and rock layers, or whatever. We want to go past. We're going to go over 50 meters down, so we're going to go past whatever's left of the ship and go below it into the mountainside. And so that's the process we're involved in right now. Now, if we hit a cavity, we have talked to a number of people involved with making very small drones, underground cameras that can move around and look and map out cavities below the surface. And that's what we'll bring in. If we hit a cavity, we'll have this miniaturized camera system that you can move with a PlayStation controller, and it'll go down under into these holes under the surface and show us what we're going to see. Hopefully we find something interesting below that we can show then everyone around the world.
So what is the evidence that you get the most excited about? Which results are you looking forward to seeing most?
I'm very excited about the underground drone. If there's cavities still there that haven't been filled in with mud, I want to see that. Some of the radar analysis done recently suggests that there are. We'll find out whether that's a correct analysis or not. So that with the core drilling, because everything's been done. You see, like you're looking at it, you're walking on it, you can measure it, you can take shallow samples, but no one has gotten deep into the site. And we'd love to find layers of either petrified wood or something that's been left there that would show that this is the remains of Noah's Ark and not just a random shape that just happens to be 300 cubits long. So we believe that the evidence so far, it's like a court case. You have all these different lines of evidence, and so far everything is pointing to this being a man-made object that's ship-shaped in the mountains of Ararat and 300 cubits long. So what else could it be? There's no water nearby, but we want to go further than that. We want to get data from inside the site and beyond anything that would be below the surface, way down into the mountainside. And that will give us the best idea what's going on below the surface, and to show people that, yes, Noah's Ark is here, the Bible is true, and this is where it finally landed and decayed away.
What will the pushback be? Who comes after this, and what would they say?
With anything related to the Bible and God, you're going to have pushback. You're going to have people who don't believe in God, who think you're wasting your time and energy, and you're believing fairy tales. They're going to become vocal and attack the efforts and the results. I don't expect 100%, I never expected this, for 100% of people around the world to believe that Noah's Ark has been found. I like pointing out the story in the Bible where you have Christ saying to the unbelievers, I think it was the Pharisees, he said, look, if I were to raise somebody from the dead, you guys still would not believe. That's the greatest miracle around, to raise a dead person and bring them back to life. And sure enough, he did that. He raised Lazarus from the dead, and they tried to kill the guy. So that didn't change their mind or hearts. You look at archaeology, you get different degrees of certainty when you're looking at, is this or this is related to what? And you're going to find archaeologists, they always debate about everything. And you're going to find that the same thing will happen here. I don't expect anything different. So we're hoping to get conclusive evidence that it's man-made and that it's a decayed wooden ship. Now, if people want to believe it's Noah's Ark or another ship that's exactly the same length as Noah's Ark, that's up to them. But we're doing our best to collect the data, and we'll let everyone else decide.
So geologists call this a syncline, a natural fold in the rock, and a peer-reviewed paper argued exactly that in 1996. What is your answer to that?
Yeah, that was a paper by David Fasold, who actually researched this site in the 80s, and also Professor Collins, who was a geologist down in Southern California, I believe. And in that paper, Collins, who's never been out here, argued that this is a folded rock formation that's been exposed and weathered. And so that's one of the terms is a syncline. But when you're out here on the site, and I've been on the site with probably the world's expert for this region, retired professor Dr. Salih Bayraktutan, who is a Turkish geologist who's still alive. And the last time I was out here was maybe a couple months ago with him. But I've known him since 2000, and he's been working this site since 1985 or 84. And he points out that like this is not even a rock formation. You have a couple big boulders in the middle, but the rest of it is earthen. There's no folded rock layers there. There's no sedimentary rocks exposed. And so it is not a syncline. He even points out that the layers of rocks in this area, the folds come in from a different direction. And so it wouldn't even produce this type of ship shape because the folding is coming in from the right behind me, which is the south side. This is the Iranian border up there, and coming in the north direction. And so when the underground, the sedimentary rocks is folding, it's in the wrong direction to produce what people would say is this a syncline. So what I like to say is that, look, you have two different geologists, one who studied it the most, he's still around, and one person in 1996 who's never been out there wrote up, and this is even before you had high quality Google Maps and satellite images of the area. But this one professor who also has a PhD says it's not, that it's a syncline, it's not Noah's Ark. But the other guy who's been studying this and lives out here and knows about every rock on the surface, he says, look, this is not a syncline. It has to be the best candidate for Noah's Ark, as we have him on video saying. So for me, I'm picking Dr. Salih Bayraktutan's side on this issue because he knows this area the best.
So another group says that the Ark is still under the ice on Mount Ararat. What do you think about those sites?
Yeah, so you have many so-called eyewitness accounts of Noah's Ark landing on Mount Ararat. And I think this all started because, number one, when you look at the biblical account, people kind of gloss over when it says mountains of Ararat, and they think, oh, Mount Ararat. And there's one traditional peak. It's a stratovolcano that's right across the valley from me, and it's called Mount Ararat. But when you start looking at the modern geological studies done in this area, in the past, people just saw the mountain, they didn't understand geology. And now when you look at the geological formation of the ground below the mountain from their deep core drilling they've done, and when you look at the mountain itself and look at the lava that's come off of it, you realize that this mountain was formed after the flood. It's built up on sedimentary layers laid down by floodwaters, by the ocean. And on top of that, those layers, you have this then volcano forming, and it's a stratovolcano or composite volcano. And if you don't know what that is, that's a type of volcano that after each eruption, it builds up the mountain. So you get these really nice conical shape, cone-shaped peaks, very beautiful mountaintops. You have Mount Rainier in America, that's a volcano like that. Mount Taranaki in New Zealand forms this type of mountain. And Mount Ararat's the same thing. It's just a stratovolcano, and you look at the lava that's come out of it, and it's dried now. There's these big giant lava beds at the base. They're all lava that's formed on land, not underwater. So if this mountain was forming underwater and building up, it would be a certain type of lava you see in Hawaii, for example. Like this, it's called pillow lava. This hot magma rock hits the cold water, and it starts billowing out and forming, they call pillow lava. This lava here is not like that. So all the evidence shows that this mountain was formed after the flood, which means it wasn't not even around for Noah's Ark to land on. So what about these so-called eyewitness accounts up there? If they all pointed to one elevation or one side of the mountain, then that'd be awesome. We would all rush up there and climb the mountain and look. But no, these eyewitness accounts, some people say it's on the north side they saw it, others on the south side. It's a 16,000 foot high mountain. It's huge. It has one of the largest bases in the world. And yet we have eyewitness accounts of Noah's Ark being on many different sides. So nothing is matching at different elevations too. So with the fact that you look at the geology, you look at the biblical account, which doesn't name a peak. It just says it was in the mountains of this area, this country called Urartu or Ararat. And then you look at all the conflicting so-called eyewitness accounts, then you realize that no, it's not possible for the ark to have landed up there. And what these people are saying about a preserved boat that's in the glacier up there is not true. Now today, the hotel I stay at here when we work, there's a lot of mountain climbers staying there. And so today you can easily get a permit and take a Turkish or Kurdish guide and climb Mount Ararat. You can go all over the mountain looking for Noah's Ark. And so far, all these years that the mountain's been open for trekking and for mountain climbers, no one has taken a selfie of Noah's Ark up there. So it doesn't exist up there. Even from your home, you can use Google Earth and look at high quality satellite maps of Mount Ararat, and nowhere you'll find a boat sticking out of the ice.
So 8 people step off the boat into an emptied world with no timber. A lot of people think they used the wood from the ark. What would be left to find?
Yeah, that's a good question. I wasn't there when Noah got off the ark. What did he use? Now, it's a huge boat. You think of, there were 4 families, Noah and his wife, and then the 3 sons and their wives. So 4 families are not going to use up Noah's ark. How do we know that? We can look at the ancient historians who wrote about Noah's ark. And these are, writers and historians 1,000 years after the flood, a lot of them around the time of Christ, a couple hundred years before, or even a couple decades after Christ was around. You look at Josephus, and he quotes these other historians. Now, Josephus was a Jewish historian from Israel, and he was writing about the Jewish history, the stories in the Bible. And when he came to his commentary, when it came to the story of the book of Genesis and Noah's Ark, he mentions and he quotes a number of historians, and he himself wrote that up to his time, people could still go see the remains of Noah's Ark. So this is 1,000 years after the flood. You have ancient pilgrims, tourists like today, going out to see somewhere boat-shaped remains. So the boat was not consumed by Noah and his children. It obviously was left out there to decay, but you still had remains for people to see up to and past the time of Christ.
Okay, so there are flood myths accounts from all over the world, every culture and corner of the globe. Skeptics say that the Bible borrowed the story. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I think there's one piece of evidence that actually shows how true the flood story is. If you just look at the ancient accounts, this same type of story of people escaping a global flood, or people even say a local flood, but they had to build a raft, a boat, and then this one family escapes. This type of flood legend is found around the world, so I don't think that's actually against the biblical account. I think that's proof of it. Now, which account is more true? Some say, well, you have the Gilgamesh epic, you have the biblical account. Which one are you going to pick? Well, I'm a believer, as a Christian believer in the Bible. I'm going to take the biblical account, even though it was written during the time of Moses. I'll take that over an earlier account that might have got its facts wrong, and I think it did, because some of these accounts have a round raft. You can imagine, like a floating saucer for their ark. Other accounts has the ark as a cube, which would be a very unstable vessel to be in an open, stormy sea, like a box floating around, tipping over and turning. So the best design is what's given in the book of Genesis for a ship to survive a flood. And so I'll take the Bible account over some of these other ancient accounts.
So what single finding would be irrefutable, and what would an independent scientist need before accepting it?
Well, since you have this debate about, is it a natural formation? Is it man-made? What is below the surface? I think the core drilling, if it can core down under there and show layers that are not just natural geology, then that would be proof that, hey, you have something buried here that's decayed away and it's in the form of a ship. And below ground, if we're finding evidence of man-made activity that suggests that it was once a ship, then you have to then think about what ship is this? And of course, if you look at the Bible gives a dimension that matches this ship shape behind me in the dark there, 300 cubits long, which is 515 feet. So for me, if I was a skeptical scientist and wanted to see evidence, then it would be what's below the surface. And once we get down there and pull out the core samples and have that analyzed in the labs here in Turkey and the United States, then I think that's the key thing that I would want to look at as a scientist.
So if the cores come back as ordinary rock, will you publicly share that evidence?
We're going to publish and share no matter what the data shows. And then we'll go from there. Whether someone's going to interpret it one way or the other, we're going to release the data. In 2019, we collected GPR data, and a number of independent scientists have asked us for that data, and we've given it to them. We've given them access, so we're not holding back and hiding secrets. And we've even released to scientists who needed to look at some of our soil analysis. We've given them access to the lab report so they can see, because in 2024 we took 88 samples inside and outside of the boat, and it was a random locations, and we asked the labs then to test those samples, and it showed that there was 3 times more organic matter inside the boat shape versus right outside. And so it's a different soil, and you think about a massive wooden boat decaying, you'd get this elevated organic content in the soil. And so, we just took the random sample. We didn't know what to show, but that data we've shared with other soil scientists and other geologists. And so we'll do the same thing with the core drilling. Once the official reports are published by the Turkish universities, any other independent, researcher that wants to see this, we'll see what the Turks say. But I believe on our side, we're fine with releasing the data and letting other people who are independent and not part of our team look at it.
What miracles have you seen God do in all of this?
When you're doing the daily grind, sometimes you just you face an obstacle, and you're like, how are we going to get through this? And yet every time there is an obstacle in front of us, there is a way through. And when you're doing this every day, sometimes you don't really pay attention to it. But then you look back and you realize, wow, just like 2 months ago, we were looking for a professor who could get the permits to do this work. Now here we are actually in the middle of this season, the first season of this multinational scientific effort to research the site, and our permits were approved. Everything we wanted to do was approved in the permit. We didn't even dream that this could happen. It's been such a long process to get to where we're at, that now we're actually doing the work. It's very exciting, and you look back, you can see where God has led and what doors He has opened.
Has anyone's life already changed because of this search?
When you're out here, the biggest thing I'd like to point out is that this is a government facility. We have a visitor center here that's owned by the Turkish government. This site is a government national park. They call it a natural national park. So you get many different tour groups here, a lot of Turkish groups, but you also get people on cultural tours. I've met atheists out here. I've met the cultural tours from Japan and Taiwan, and Korea, who they say, oh, we're not here for any religious or Christian, tours. We're just here to see this exciting site and want to see what you guys are doing there. And we tell the biblical story. So we tell them, well, in the Bible, it says this is this. In the holy books, they talk about Noah and the flood. We believe this is the evidence for it, and here's our evidence. Here's what we're doing. Here's the scans. Here's the soil analysis. Here's the measurements of the site. And by planting those seeds, you don't know. These people take back this information to their country, and they can do their own research into the story. Now, personally, I've known friends who, not friends, but acquaintances, people who have come out here who just wanted to see, curious, what's going on. But they're not a committed believer, and they tell you later, Andrew, this is very exciting. I don't know what will happen, what you guys are going to ultimately find here, but it made them interested in the biblical account, and something most people don't even think about. Like every day here, we're thinking about Noah's Ark, but most people don't think about Noah's Ark. And so when you plant that seed and give them information about a biblical event that happened, God does the rest, and the Holy Spirit will water that seed, and hopefully grow into something that will produce results.
So if this is the ark, what changes on a Monday morning for someone who has never thought about God once?
That's a good question. As I grew up as a believer, and as a kid, I remember making paper mache models of Noah's Ark and putting these little plastic animals in it with my brother. And so it's hard for me to think outside of that. Okay, like going from not believing in something and then believing into it. Well, I think the biggest thing is they'll have to take the whole Bible as truth, because one of the biggest, not miracles, but stories in the Bible is the destruction of the then known world and 8 people being saved because God tells them to build this giant wooden boat. And so if you're not a believer, that's just a fantastical story. Evolution, they say, doesn't support this idea of a global flood, but then when you find proof of it, that to me, again, I'm approaching it from someone who's already a believer, but I think that they would wake up if they say, wow, Noah's, in the news it says, look, we have this hard evidence, this is Noah's Ark. If they're a true searcher of truth, if they're really honest and wanting to find the truth, this will give them pause, and I think they would want to find out more and say, wow, okay, if this story is true, then what else in the Bible is true, and what's going on in the world today that points to what's coming next. So,
what's your main prayer for the day that the drill goes in?
Equipment failure. I hope it doesn't happen. When you're out in a remote location, we've seen anything and everything happen, whether it's equipment breaking down or something not working or some enemy of ours trying to stop the work. I've been out here even doing like video work, just taking regular photos like any tourist, and having the military police come out, the gendarme, and say stop, and then make you delete your footage, because someone called in and said you're a spy. So it's just craziness. My prayer of the day that we drill is that we just have a smooth drilling. I want to get whatever data is below the ground. I don't want it to be a waste of money and time. So I'm hoping that, of course, we hit some really good locations. And your drill is going to be at most 6 inches wide, and that's a 515-foot long object. So there's plenty of locations to drill, but maybe not all locations are the best, because maybe some have better preservation below the ground, and others could just be filled with rocks, or dirt, because it's a wooden vessel that decayed away. So I'm hoping like the holes that are selected ahead of time that we drill into are the most has the most data, or the best data that we can then analyze over the winter months.
So would a university fund this? Has anyone ever offered?
When you're dealing with an object or a search for Noah's Ark, as we talked about before, it's a special topic, because you're putting people's reputations on the line. So whether it's the university or the professor who's doing the work. So most likely, most universities would not put their money into looking for Noah's Ark. It's a tough thing to find. If someone found it before us, that would have been great. But all these years up till now, we have the ancient historians talking about people seeing it. But then in modern times, we lost the location. No one knew where it was at. So I don't see a university putting up that type of funding, especially these days with the way the economy is. So it's taking a lot of private effort to do this.
So grant committees decide what gets studied. How does public funding things like this change scientific endeavors?
Yeah, when they're going to write grants, they usually have very specific requirements, and the money has to be used very specifically. We have some people who have put up money. It was like a grant process, and they're very specific about things. But the interest was because they were interested in the Noah's Ark topic, and the person was a multi-billionaire. He didn't give us all the money we need for this. He gave us a small amount, and he wanted to see the results. But this individual did help with a portion of the budget, and that's kind of how it works with any grant, any funding you get from these committees or other organizations. It's really tough to get get that type of funding. So it's a lot easier to appeal to the general public and say, hey, this is a project we're doing. If you're interested in our project, help us. Here's the link. Here's the way you can donate.
And what would you say to people about why this is worth funding?
As someone who's been out here and seen the number of tourists that come through, I really believe this is a very special site, because you're not going to find a site like this anywhere in the world where you're looking at the actual object associated with this event in the book of Genesis, and then you're on Turkish property in the country of Turkey, and with their facility here, and you're then able to explain the whole story of Noah and the flood. And so it's a very unique site and location we're at. And it's also a very unique way, like show and tell, where you can be on the site and see the site and talk about the story found in the Bible. So if someone is interested in that type of work that we're doing out here, I think that this is the best type. You know, I'm always interested in archaeology. And so the topic of Noah's Ark is very special to me since I first came out here in '97. But I think for other people, their interest, if they haven't been out here, it's more of archaeology. If you're interested in archaeology, then we're at the forefront here at a very controversial topic about Noah's Ark, and we're doing our best. And so if you would like to support us, I really think this is one of the best places in the research we're doing under a government-approved permit. This is the best time. This has never been done before, what we're doing.
What does this phase of work cost, and where does the money actually go?
Well, our current budget is over $1 million. So where does that money goes? Well, here's a good example. The geophysical work, including like radaring, these are not free activities. We're not the scientists might be believers, but they have to bring in a crew. They have to do all that time analyzing the data. They're putting in. They're a business, so they're putting their time and effort. So when we hire these companies, these firms to come out here and do the special work that they're professional at, so like the radaring, it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to get that done. And the core drilling, our estimates range from a couple $100,000 to $500,000 to bring a core drilling machine. And now we're praying that we can get it cheaper, but our estimated budget for the first season, including those big ticket items, is over $1 million. And so that's where the work goes. We also we have to pay the salary of the archaeologists who are involved, because this is what they're taking their time away. They're part of our project. They got the permit. They're leading the project. They're putting in the time to go through. We had so many obstacles placed in front of us, and our Turkish archaeologists managed and navigated all those issues and got us to where we're at today. Plus, being the professional, they have to be out here every day working with us side by side. So you have salaries involved. And then we have the winter testing, where we're going to take all these samples, the soil samples, the core drilling samples, to the labs and analyze every single piece of data there, and then we have to present it. So you're talking about more time and money involved with the lab technicians, paying for the test results. It's very expensive. It's not a free thing where you just go out and take a picture, say, oh look, it's Noah's Ark. There's a lot of work involved, and so that's where our budget's going.
So for someone that's watching this right now and wants in, what do they do?
If you're watching this and you're seeing me standing here in the mountains of Ararat in the dark now, if you want more information, we do have different ways on our social media, on our website, noahsarkscans.com, through our social media pages of the same name, where you can follow along and you can financially support us, you can pray for us. But if you want to join in, the only way right now, because Turkey doesn't allow volunteers to work with archaeological projects, you have to be a student or a professional archaeologist in Turkey to actually be a part of an excavation or a scientific expedition. And so the only way right now that people can join in is through financial support and your prayers and spreading the word. Tell your friends about this project.
Is there anything else that you want to say that's on your mind?
Another way that we're getting the word out, we're making a professional documentary film about this effort this year and the years to come. And so we're not only going to be filming the technicians, the lab reports coming out, but we're going to put an underground camera that will go into the site and explore if there's any cavities down below. So it's a very unique opportunity for us to tell the world about the story of Noah's Ark and the flood. And we're doing that by doing the actual scientific research here on site. And so this is all being filmed professionally, and we hope that will be used as a tool to get the word out about this story.